Thank you very much, Ilana. Now, testimony in the mammoth trial of Oscar Pistorius is close to conclusion, with the defense this past week calling two character witnesses, Pistorius' agent Piet van Zyl and sports medicine professor Wayne Derman, with what some are calling the defense's final gambit to show that Pistorius' disability made him extremely vulnerable and that he had to rely on primitive reflexes to survive what he perceived as an imminent threat on the morning that he shot and killed Riva Steenkamp. But Advocate Harry Nel was not going to allow that testimony to fly without any fight.
You've got a paradox of an individual who is supremely able, and you've got an individual who is significantly disabled. And that difference in this template of the supremely abled individual and what we see here causes a, in my opinion, significant amount of stress and anxiety.
Wouldn't you say that an expert witness would require a high sense of objectivity to be able to assist the court in any way?
Indeed, I would, sir.
But that you don't have, because objectivity may harm your client, your patient.
And that, of course, is an excerpt from the Oscar Pistorius murder trial and this past weekend thereof. And with the predicted end to the trial this week, we have with us on the line Teresa Taylor from The Star to summarize the past few days' events. Teresa, if we take a step back and look at the 15th witness that was called by the defense, Pistorius' manager or agent, Piet van Zyl, he testified a bit on the general fear and the anxiety that Oscar Pistorius might have had towards this perceived danger. What were some of the highlights that you could draw from that testimony?
Well, I think, Pete obviously spent a lot of time with Oscar. Oscar was, his sort of chief prize, his main sports star. They traveled around the world together, and he relayed a number of incidents where, Oscar had started, where Oscar had been frightened. And I think the key point of his testimony was, in fact, a story about how Oscar had been planning to take Riva overseas. He said that just the night the night before the killing, he had sent an email to ask for an air ticket for Riva to take her to a sports game overseas. And that's a very key point, because why, for the defense's case, why would Oscar Pistorius murder the woman that he loved so much that he wanted to take her to show her his world and his games overseas? Yeah,
and I think a very important point afterwards, Piet mentioning that he's only seen Oscar lose his temper once, but Advocate Harry Nel brought up a number of events that he says that he can actually use as evidence where Oscar has lost his temper. What were these events, and what will their impact be finally on the case, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, any witness on the stand faces a very interesting conundrum because Oscar Pistorius' life was so widely reported on, because he was such a famous man. It is easy for Harry, and Harry now has clearly read all of the articles and all of the newspaper stories. It's easy for him to say, oh, well, you say it's just this and this, but actually remember when this was reported, or what about this story? And, Nell brought up a number of other incidents, things like a boating accident, and asked and questioned Van Zyl, did you know about this? What about this? Surely you read this story. This was your job. You were his manager. You can't say that you didn't know about these things.
So what do you think that impact will be on the trial, and especially on the judge's decision going forward?
Well, it depends how she views the character evidence. Van Zyl, did do quite a lot when the defense was leading evidence to paint Oscar in quite a golden light. And it depends on, there is talk that the state could even ask to reopen their case, potentially based on the amount of character evidence that has been led by the defense.
Yeah, well, it's been, I think, a very gripping trial, not for us only as South Africans, but the rest of the world as well. Teresa, thank you very much for taking your time to give us a bit of a summary of the events. Thank you.
No problem.
That is Teresa Taylor from The Star giving us her summary of the last week's events from the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. We'll be bringing you more a bit later on as well. But of course, to keep up with the details of the trial, also go to www.sabcnews.co.za. Right about now, let's talk about what happened this weekend in Ballito. The Ballito Pro came to its conclusion, of course, serving as a curtain raiser to South Africa's premier surfing event, the J-Bay Pro, that'll be taking place in the weeks to come. But we had our cameras there to catch all the action and the waves. That's right, Graham. As testimony in the trial of Oscar Pistorius draws to a close, a major theme has been Pistorius' psychology, particularly his state of mind and the reasons behind some of his actions on the morning of February the 14th last year. Now, the biggest question has been why Pistorius, if he feared for his life, would approach a perceived danger and not flee from that danger. Here's sports medicine professor Wayne Derman's analysis from the trial.
Mr. Pistorius' significant disability, when he is left without the benefit of his prostheses, does not allow him sufficient mobility or balance to protect himself and take flight. Fleeing is not an option. The individual has no lower legs, so to flee is not an option. And if one finds oneself without the ability to flee, the other option is to fight. So to approach the danger in this is an understandable physiological phenomenon.
And that is an excerpt from Professor Derman's testimony in the trial. And joining us in studio, psychologist Charissa Bloomberg, to give us her analysis and her professional take on matters. And so the big theme, Charissa, has been this fight or flight response. And it's been compared, one instance of a disabled person or individual and the other of a not disabled person or individual. How did the differences work in terms of fight or flight? Is there a difference?
You know, that's a very interesting question, Kat. A person who's disabled will be more prone and be more vulnerable, more prone to anxiety. Okay, we know that. But however, the physiological fight or flight will be exactly the same. They just may have more stresses. But if they have sound mind, you know, then it's a whole moral dilemma.
Yeah.
You know, how do we judge them?
Yes.
But definitely more generalized anxiety. But we are generalizing that as we're
Yes.
saying that as well.
Exactly.
So,
you say that, yeah, we are generalizing because Oscar was ordered by the court to go to Westkoppies and spend a month under observation, and the report that came back found that he didn't have generalized anxiety disorder.
Yes.
Take us through some of those findings and, you know, maybe we could shed some light on his behavior.
Yes, they found that he didn't have that. They also found that he didn't have any aggressive behavior.
Yeah.
And they also found, you know, he was aware of his actions as well. And there was no abuse to women as before, as you know, so nothing leading up to that. So, you know, but what is interesting for me, and this is what I have to raise, I'm sorry, I just have to say this.
Please do.
Okay, there's two arguments. The one is that it was anxiety and he shot through the door. Okay, it precipitated it. And the other one, that there was an argument of rage, which is what the state's saying. But either way, there was that fight or flight response. Either way, there was a loss of impulse control, which I find fascinating. So for either results, it's the same.
So how would you then say, having given that point of view, in whose favor does it play out then? In the defence's case or the state's case? Well,
see, when we're talking about loss of impulse control, if it was anger, then there's loss of impulse control and the fight or flight. The blood starts pumping, the heart starts going, everything is racing, and there would only have been one fight or flight response and then shoot through the door. Whereas if it was the other way, the anxiety disorder, then they say that there's 3 fight or flights. So it's very interesting. And what also happens is when there's fight or flight, how long does it take to actually come down from that? Some people say 20 minutes, some people can say an hour for the body to normalize. So in whose state, I don't know, I dare not say, but
yeah, of course.
I better not give my opinion.
I don't want to put you on the spot that, unless, of course, if you feel like you'd like to.
Suicide.
And what about the relevance of history or history of violence in relationships, where I guess there's been no indication of aggression, as you said, in the past in relationships concerning Oscar Pistorius. Does that play into the defence's case or the state's case?
You're putting me on the spot.
Am I?
You know what? You know what?
Don't put yourself in any danger.
Well, there's 2 kinds of crimes, I think. The person who has the violent abuse, where there's rape and there's rage and there's murder. And then the other one who could just, you know, a crime of passion, where in that moment, they're so furious. Maybe the person is saying they're going to leave them. Maybe there's insecurity. And then, sure, they just lose it. They build and lay and gone.
Yeah.
So
I guess,
I leave it open to you, which
that's
side.
As far as we can take it. But thank you very much, Charissa, for your professional opinion. We do appreciate it very much. Now, the trial continues today with a cross-examination of Professor Wayne Derman. And also, don't forget to share your thoughts with us on our Facebook page. And for more in-depth details on the trial, visit www.sabcnews.com.